Good to see you. It's nice to see that there is another recurrence of presence, like a routine for some of you. Graziella, Alain, Chris, Francesco, of course, part of the team. And we have Philadelphia. Welcome, Philadelphia, to our talk. So for the new ones on board, a brief introduction about the way we run this talk. It's a 30 minutes, very quick and focused on different topics every second Friday of the month. This evening, our topic is on making choices, as you've seen in your emails and so on. I will make a brief introduction about the background to the topic, and as always, the floor is yours, so be prepared to take the lead and to speak up about choices that you've made in your life that have been challenging or that have helped you understand what it entails. And by way of introduction about making choices, it's true that from very, very early age, we have to make choices. And I was thinking this morning, we're spending a bit of time with a 5-year-old. So you have to choose between vanilla, chocolate, or strawberry ice cream. So you have to choose your flavor. And then you grow up and you have to make choices of your education, whether you choose literature or engineering or science. So those are different choices, but still choices. And then as you grow on, you have to choose different careers, different paths. In personal and professional life, choices are everywhere. And part of the reason why I think this topic is really, really important is that in my early work with Savoir-Relier, you know, for those of you who have practiced Savoir-Relier, you know that the first step of the process is to do a self-reflection and to write a solo or self-portrait. And in that reflection, early in my work, I was reading a lot of self-portraits from people who were more senior in their career and in their life. And I noticed that in reading those self-portraits, I read a lot of regrets. People expressing, you know, looking back, regrets about not having accomplished what they were aiming to accomplish, not having spent enough time with their family, or lots of regrets. And I think that the choices you make, if they're sound, if they're prepared, if you're not only making a choice, but also looking further behind the choice, beyond the choice, what it entails, the consequences of the choice, how it may affect your surroundings, not just yourself, but people around you, are so important to think ahead and to project into, that I think it's worth thinking about and looking at your own experience with making choices to see how. And I would like to conclude the talk today with a 5-minute brief on perhaps giving you a process that should help you and guide you in making choices that are more sound, more serene, and more consistent with your values. Because a lot of questions around choices, sometimes you think you're making a choice and you're not. And I know, for example, very quickly in French education, we know that a lot of kids go into a cycle of education that they haven't chosen really, but they think they have. And then they reach age 25 or 30 and they look back and, well, I'm here, I've done this, but in fact, I'm an engineer and I'm not interested at all in what engineering leads to. So making choices are very important from early age on. And now it's your turn to share some of your experience in choices that you've made that maybe were not the ones you expected, or were challenging, or challenged some of the values that you have in terms of alignment and coherence between what you would like to do and what you actually do in the end. So who would like to start speaking? And I would like to say a brief hello to Nicolas. I know Nicolas from way back when. And
Hi, Valerie.
Here too. So nice to see you and to have you on board. So, okay, you're on, Hans. You're ready to speak.
Yes, and this time I fixed the problem. I was connected to another Wi-Fi section. That's why it went all crazy. No, I'm going to tell you a quick story. As I was beginning, I was in a car accident because I decided to work night shifts. I wanted to get experience because I wanted to be a police officer initially. And what happened was that I had an accident, a car accident, where I fell asleep behind a wheel. And it was a nasty accident, but I came out unscathed. That choice actually brought me to another conclusion, that life is too short and that I really needed to change the way how I saw what the world wanted from me. So instead of going through the same thing over and over again, I decided to jump on a plane a few months later, come to Switzerland, and to join the army here, like in Switzerland. And ever since then, that was the drop in the bucket that overflowed, and I've been living here in Switzerland since. And I'm blessed that I made that choice for myself.
Thanks for sharing, Hans. Any
welcome.
reaction, comment, feedback? And raise your hand or jump in. Don't hesitate.
Hello, hi everybody. Thanks, Hans. I'm jumping in because I also moved to Switzerland, so it's kind of bizarre. But,
Yes.
Yeah, I'll just give you a couple of things. I mean, that was a really big decision for me way back when. I've been abroad from the UK. I grew up in the UK and moved to Switzerland 15 years ago. And I remember that being a really, really stressful decision to make because I had all my friends and family back in the UK. So I did take the time to go through, the pros and cons and finally decided that was, the thing I wanted to do because I'd already had quite a career behind me. And that was just fantastic. I mean, when I'm kind of looking back a little bit now and seeing what living in another country gave to me, which is just so much, and it's quite tough, I think, at times, but you get a lot back. Even learning French, which has been my bête noire for a long time, perfecting my French. So I'm still going on that one. I'm still a work in progress. And I guess more recently, I've moved into a different kind of work, which is social development work, where I was in the market research industry. So that's really a big curveball, and which has been great for me because I've learned so many new skills, and I just love working in the sector with really passionate people. So that's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for sharing. Who wants to jump in next?
Just one question to you, Steve. When you explain the process by which you make some decision and choices, do you feel that you actually had a very rational, reasonable thinking process, or did you have, sort of wake up call in the morning and say, that's what I want to do, not knowing exactly whether it was intuition, passion, or what? What was the situation you were in when you decide?
For the like moving into the social development work, it was really, I think, quite a slow burn because I moved to Geneva, and I there's a big social development scene in Geneva, and I got to meet people when I wasn't working in the sector that really impressed me, by their motivation. They really inspired me. So I think I was unconsciously looking for something, but I didn't know I was looking, if that makes any sense. And so when I met somebody that I basically wanted to get involved with from hearing her pitch at an event, and it was as simple as that. She invited me along to the first session of this new confidence building program she was running. I went along and I was kind of blown away by it, and that's what really drove me to pitch fully in, where I was putting my toes in the water, but I never really pitched straight in. So, and it hasn't looked back from then.
I think that's a very interesting point, that in many situations like we are at some point to decide to go one direction and versus another, there's a small thing that happens. A person you meet, something you see, you always see a film or something, and thinking this is just the tipping point that led you to this, where in fact it's actually a growing process, and that event or situation was just capturing everything and you say, that's it, right? That's what I want to do, which is kind of very interesting process. Sometimes you have to let things come and those situations will tell you something, which is kind of always very interesting. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I grabbed a conversation with her at the end of the event. It was kind of strange, you know, that if I hadn't have done that, it wouldn't have happened, I think, because that little conversation, that maybe no more than 2 minutes, led to everything that's gone since. So
yeah.
Okay, thank you. Who wants to jump in next?
I can give my own testimony if you like my humble testimony, and I'd like to rebound on what you said, Valerie, and hello, by the way. Yeah, I was educated in France, and in France we often we are educated at school and often by parents by punishing the mistakes and not encouraging the good things in what we do. And I was always in this education. And I'm a terrible decision maker, because when I have to make a decision, and as any decision is giving up something, I'm always scared to, you know, make the wrong decision, being punished for that. I guess it's something inside of me. So I'm still a very terrible decision maker, but I'm trying to cure myself. I think that I learned a lot during the MBA about, you know, the right to fail or the right to make mistakes. I'm trying to cultivate things like that. Quite recently, I joined a startup in cybersecurity, and we're expanding abroad. So we have to make decisions on which country we are going to address. We are going to hire people. So I just made the decision to address the UK. I hired someone, but I still don't know if it's the right decision. Maybe I should have chosen Germany or go to the US, whatever. So again, I mean, this is my own testimony, but as someone who has been educated in France, I feel I'm a terrible decision maker. But yeah, now I'm trying to dare, and I'm trying not to be afraid of making mistakes.
Question for all of you, and you can also tell a story that doesn't have anything to do with my question, but it's one question I have about. We had two examples of choices that were made and triggered by, on the one hand, Hans, an accident, on the other, an opportunity or something that triggered your move. And Nicolas saying that you're talking about decision. Do you think that there is a difference between making choices for yourself and making decisions for something that you have to deliver, like recruitment or? And when I say yourself, it could be a personal choice, like life choice, your spouse or somebody else, or professional choice, career or orientation or so on. Hans, you have your hand up.
Well, for me, it was really a matter of how I felt with the decision that I was going to do. It's quite crazy sometimes that when you get that little voice that tells you, do it, and it's one of those scary yet amazing decisions that you make, because you're basically leaving it up to fate. You're also building a sort of like having faith in yourself, and faith and fate they sound similar, but they're basically going in two different directions. And in my personal case, I had a lot of, I believe that it was a fate waiting for me out there, and I couldn't find it if I would have stayed at home on the farm, or if I would have stayed as a security guard, or if I would have stayed doing what I didn't want to do. I followed my heart, and that's what I did, and I'm glad that I did.
Thank you for sharing, Hans. Yes, very, very important, the notion of fate or chance, to look at it in another way, and how you play your chance and you work with it and accept making mistakes potentially and moving forward anyhow. The movement that you create around this element that triggers your choice or your orientation, or keeping in mind one thing, and there's one thing I often say when I do Savoir-Relier training, is that you cannot redo the past. You know, the past is there. In the same way, you cannot change others. Your choices are with you, and that's why how you lead your choice, and how once you're in your choice, you have to stick with it because you cannot go backwards. It's very important that the more aligned you are with your own values and the more confident you are with your choices, the more likely you are to feel you can work with them, you can work through them, and you can work with them. Alain, you have your hand up.
First, hello, everybody. I'm happy to be with you. And I want to thank you, Valerie and Camilla and your partner at work for inviting me many times. I feel like part of your extended family. And in terms of choice, I met by accident. I was flying between New York and Paris, and I met Professor Herbert Shepard from MIT, who became the father of the OD movement. He created the first organization development PhD, and he became my mentor. And I realized that choice transcends everything we do in life. We have to make a choice about our mission, choice about who do we want to be with, a choice about what are we going to do in the future, a choice about beliefs. And I became so interested that I ultimately made it part of my day-to-day job. And in trying not to reinvent the wheel about choice, I looked back at history to see what can I learn from those who faced the issue much earlier than we did. And I came up with a number of templates and roadmaps about choice. The first one is I went back to Sun Tzu in The Art of War. And in Sun Tzu, he says, Sun Tzu, in advising the emperor, he says we have 4 generic choices all the time whenever we face, and the emperor was interested about peace and war. And he told him one of the options is to stay put, not to do anything, or in French, laissez-faire, or être attentiste. The second is to do the minimum to get by. And in plain American terms, it's the minimum to stay out of jail or compliance. The third is to do what's normal, best practices, hitchhike on competition ways, etc. And the fourth one, he called supreme excellence. And then some entrepreneurial consultants, like the man who produced the 8 Habits, called it proactive, which was a mistake because Dr. Frankl never thought you should be proactive, as we have in the first chapter of the book. Proactive is only one choice. And sometimes the best choice is to do nothing. Sometimes it's to do the minimum to get by. Sometimes it's to go best practices. And ultimately, sometimes it's to convert the situation from a threat into an opportunity and to look at it differently. And so I learned from Sun Tzu about these 4 options. And many years later, I was speaking with Paul Farmer, who passed away 4 weeks ago from Harvard Medical School. He has created the equivalent of Médecins Sans Frontières. It's called Partners in Health. And he told me, as a doctor, I always have 4 choices. And I thought maybe he's thinking about Sun Tzu. But every person here, when you see a doctor, they have to, once they have done diagnosis, the first thing they think is laissez-faire. In other words, if I give you medication or I go in for an intervention, the adverse consequences may be worse than nothing. So laissez-faire is legitimate in medicine. Second one is to go symptomatic, like a painkiller. And the third one is to go etiologic. The word etios comes from Greek, which means getting to the cause, eradicating the cause of the problem. And like antibiotics are an etiologic treatment to get rid of bacteria. And the last option for every doctor is to go hybrid, because giving an injection to a child would be controversial. So I may want to give them an injection and a candy, but that's not hybrid. Why? Because it's called compound intervention. If I put the active ingredient in a pill, which sugar, then they think it's a candy. And that's the 4th choice. And so a few years ago, I put these into a grid So horizontally, I have the Sun Tzu options, and vertically, I have the medical options. But to move away from medicine into management, I don't call it etiologic because people will think I'm too technical. So instead of using the technical name from medicine, I go laissez-faire, relational instead of symptomatic, paying attention to the relationship. Instead of talking about etiologic, we go substantive, we deal with the problem. Or not only we deal with the problem, but we present it in a way that's acceptable so that we can engage the stakeholders. And that's the hybrid choice. Mm-hmm. And when you put them together, you have 16 cells, but 6 of them are imaginary, but the 10 are real. So we have a 10 decimal system where 0, 0 is laissez-faire, laissez-faire doing nothing. And then as you move, you have 9 others. So I will send you, you could share it with other people, that grid, and we use it as usually for strategy creation or from personal life planning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alain. It's always great to have different frames to look at ways of either making choices or problems. And your frames are always very valuable. So thank you for sharing, and we'll definitely will share, and Camila will put it with Camille on available on Facebook or LinkedIn. I want to say a brief hello to Jean-Philippe and to Karsten who've joined us, and to Taslim. Welcome to our talk. It's always a pleasure to see old friends. And we continue on giving you the floor on maybe one other story of choices that you've made and what triggered that choice, and how, because that's one element of continuity in how you approach choices, is how do they match your values, how do they challenge your values, or how do they question the way you see yourself in the projection of your life. So anybody else wants to share a story, maybe Graziella, maybe, I don't know, anyone, Juliet? Story of choice, or maybe Camila.
Can I share a choice, Valerie? Karsten here.
Okay.
I know, I'm sorry, I'm a little late, but anyway, yeah, maybe the making choices, obviously there's consequences associated to that. I didn't hear all the starting point, but having some level of framework, some level of way to go towards making those choices. And I've been in high-tech business for over 30 years, led large companies both in Europe and US as well as Asia, and found one person who I got to know personally very well. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐓𝐚𝐥𝐤, I think you referred to, the previous speaker referred to him a little bit with the 7 and 8 habits. But one of the core things once about making choices is kind of a prioritization, because the kind of the urgent and the important is what gets thrown at us every day. There's so many urgent things, especially now with social media and the way we communicate. You don't have time to look at the important things anymore versus the urgent things.
Well, you've got your phone. Yeah, Karsten, yeah.
Somehow I'm muted. But so some of the, I think one of the core things that I recognize within running larger companies is to have a clear prioritization process towards making choices. Making choices is absolutely very important, and having people with various cultures have different ways to make choices, which is the beauty of being able to run international companies and so forth. But having some level of framework to prioritization, obviously the values being core, but that prioritization I used a lot, and I used 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐓𝐚𝐥𝐤. I traveled around the whole world, whether it's Chinese, whether it's European, various countries, US and so forth. And I used that framework, which is the 7 or 8 habits, very much, because yes, the productivity is a choice. I understand that you can be a couch potato, or you can make a choice to be proactive, but proactive is one thing, but then beginning with the end in mind, having some level of direction. First things first, how do you separate between what's urgent? Everything is urgent. And today there's more urgent things in every second of your life than ever before, because of the connectivity that we have. But separating the urgent to the important is highly important. And then, as you go forward towards that, towards that seek first to understand before being understood. It's a beautiful topic, because all of us in the world like to make choices, especially if you're independent and you're a strong person, you make the choices, but actually listening and seeking to understand where the other person, especially from other cultures, come from, I found is the most difficult of those habits, especially if you're a strong leader, if you are, a strong person. If you do make choices, normally leaders make choices much faster than because they go more in intuition potentially. But seeking first to understand, I think, is a fundamental topic. It's very complex, especially for strong people, to actually listen at all. So I think that's important. And then obviously, synergize and making sure that habit constantly gets refreshed, because it's not something, the choices piece of it, I think it's a daily, it's like learning. You never stop learning. And I think making choices, you never stop making choices. And the more you can have some level of framework, of which clearly values and principles are at the core of making any choices. But I think this sort of concept of sitting on the line, anyway, I'm not one of those. I'd like to make a choice. And sometimes, as we know, in disruptive learnings, which is kind of that next phase, disruptive learning, it's you make mistakes. I mean, you don't learn if you don't make mistakes. So if you don't make a choice, I know it's easier not to make a choice because you could potentially make a mistake. But I think in today's, especially in the high-tech world, it's the way you try things out and you correct things immediately. So the faster you can learn, the faster you can learn from mistakes. That's the way forward. So I think having a framework for me in my life, having run international companies all around the world, I think something like a good framework is to help make those choices and to be understood, with the principles and the values being at the core of everything. I think that helped a lot, and so that's my contribution there.
Okay,
thank you very much, Karsten. Back to framework, and maybe because this session is very short, it's a half hour. I promised I would leave you with yet another framework, or more likely a process. And the process is one that some of you already know. It's what I call 𝐓𝐤, which associates, and Karsten, you made a reference to the question of intuition as maybe a way of making choices faster, or leaders being able to make choices faster or better than others. For me, intuition is not a question of speed. And what is very important in making choices is that you must be able to associate both your intuitive side and your rational side, not to oppose them, but to combine them, so that you make sense of whatever situation you're in. And that's for me the first stage of the relational circuit, or 𝐓𝐤, where you explore a situation by associating your perception, your intuition to the issue, and your analytical understanding of the situation, so that you by combining your perception and your analytical skills, you make sense of what's going on. And once you've done this exploration, then what you need to do to make that choice and to put yourself in motion is to project yourself. So once you've done the sense making, what you want to do is rebuild or build sense. And to build sense, you have to open to projection with different scenarios, scenario planning, what if approaches, to project yourself in different options before jumping into one. And of course, when you're used to that kind of process and you're ready to move into action, once you've done all those steps, but in a sequential way, so very important: intuition, rational analysis, mind mapping, and sense making of the situation. Then, only then, projection, looking ahead, anticipating different options through brainstorming or different scenario planning. And then you put yourself in motion and become move into ID action. So you put yourself in motion, and then you're more likely, because you have done that initial stage of associating intuition and rational thinking, you're more likely to be in sync with your own beliefs, with your own values, and the end result is more likely to be closer to you. So you're likely to live with it, and as you said, yes, probably facing new mistakes because it is systemic and you don't necessarily have the right answer right away, but you keep trying, like you do in entrepreneurial mindset. But I think the very important in the framework that was shared by Alain or yours, Karsten, are definitely aspects of making choices, and you don't need one but several ways of looking at your choices, as long as, and that will be my conclusion, I think again, looking back, if you can, at the last stage of your life, look back and say, I have no regrets with what I've done, I think you can say you will have led a good life. And if you look back and you're filled with regrets and you're bitter and eager, angry at what you've done and not satisfied with the consistency of your choices, then you will suffer and it will be a sad way of finishing your life. So I think keep that in mind, that notion of avoid regrets, do whatever it takes, whichever framework you want to use, but make sure that you're consistent and you're in sync with your values so that you build a strong base for your choices, whatever they are, and at all the stages of your life. It's 7 o'clock, so that's our time. Maybe Philippe wants to share, or Camila, a few words about the work we're doing, and always inviting you to join. It's very important that that we meet. We're always very happy to invite you and to spend that time with you, to give you the floor and share. In between talks, we do have these moments of interactions. We've opened the duo times. So if you're interested in continuing the practice of the duo, you can just sign up and follow our invitations to, I think, Camila, correct me if I'm wrong, it's on Thursdays that we have the duo times?
Yeah, it's on Thursdays, second and first and third.
First and third Thursdays of the month?
In the chat.
You just have a link. If you want to do a duo with anyone from the community or anyone who's invited and you want to engage in sharing your solo and doing this 1.5 hour exchange with one person, please take advantage of it. It's open and free, and we can only encourage you to do this because we know how valuable it is to meet people with depth and an open mind, no judgment, no intention, and no expectation from each other, just the relationship. Very important. So looking forward to seeing you again, and very happy to be with you every second Friday of the month. Thank you, Nicolas. Thank you, everyone who's still on, everyone, Alain, everyone.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Graziella.
À très bientôt.
Talk
À
soon.
bientôt.
Bye. Ciao.
Pleasure to see you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye now.
Bye, Chris.
Elle est sympa.